So welcome back. It's November 13th, and we've just concluded our second day of court proceedings, and I'm with our awesome team, MWF's legal counsel. We have Jonathan Andrews, we have Kevin Toyne, and we have Jesse Rock. From my perspective today, this one's hard for me to explain because I actually wanted our membership to be in that courtroom today. There was a part of me that saw this amazing representation on MWF's behalf that I wish every member and supporter and club and donor could have witnessed. And somehow I would like to bring a little bit of insight to that, obviously respecting the fact that our honorable judge has reserved his decision, and there is some things that we can't talk about in depth today, but if we can enlighten our membership a little bit about, what has essentially happened in the courtroom over the last 48 hours, which was a lot. It's a very complex case. I feel like you guys have presented MWF in such a incredibly respectful manner, and the dialogue today was respectful from start to finish. And if we can, just have a candid conversation about, the overall submissions that MWF proposed today, and maybe enlighten the membership a little bit about what we have proposed as potential resolutions. I don't know who wants to start, but dive in. Jonathan, do you want to kind of frame what you framed yesterday, but do you want to recap on yesterday and then kind of dive in on a little bit of a summary about today?
Sure, yeah, happy to. So it was a 2-day hearing that is looking at this question of whether the July 11 decision of the minister concerning the number of licenses available for moose hunters in northern Manitoba would be available. People will remember that the minister decided at quite a last minute to reduce the number of licenses by 75%. So the narrow lens of the litigation is on that particular decision, and we've had a 2-day hearing on that with 4 parties, so the Manitoba Wildlife Federation, the Province of Manitoba, MKO, and then also Pimicikamak Cree Nation or Cross Lake Band of Indians. I mentioned yesterday that the applicants went, so Pimicikamak went, and then the Manitoba Wildlife Federation. The government went today, and then MWF and Pimicikamak had some further submissions at the end of the day. And so as I mentioned, the decision is or rather the case is focused on this narrower question of the July 11 decision of the minister, but is getting at these broader issues and questions about how to balance the interests of treaty rights and other societal interests like the interests of the licensed hunters in Manitoba. And we're of course here advocating for that position. And I think you were wanting me to just mention sort of how the work being done in the courtroom is in parallel to the broader efforts. And of course, the Wildlife Federation is doing these town halls and all this other important advocacy on behalf of licensed hunters. And we as litigation counsel play sort of a smaller role in that. Obviously, the goal is to resolve all of these things through a sort of a dialogue and a process that doesn't have to get to the courts, but sometimes you do have to go to the court and to sort of stand up for and advocate for your rights, and that's what we've been doing the last couple of days.
There was a point, Kevin, when you stood up and you were presenting to the judge some potential requests or I'm not sorry, the legal terms like resolutions that he could potentially look at, and there were a few key points that might resonate with our membership in terms of management decisions going forward, how we could potentially essentially give direction to management decisions going forward due to the outcome of this court case, and maybe avoid litigation going forward if the judge was to go that path. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so one of the primary requests that's been made is for the court to declare that the minister's decision to reduce the number of licenses by 75% was unlawful. And there's a variety of reasons why we've told the judge that they can and should conclude that the decision was unlawful. But in addition to that, what we've also asked the court to do is to take another step further and not just say that the decision was unlawful, but to give the government guidance on how it should be making wildlife management decisions in the future. Now, there's no guarantee that the judge will accept the argument that that should happen, but the reason why we've made that request is really interesting. During the lead up to the court hearing, witnesses from the government were asked questions under oath, and one of the witnesses agreed that a successful wildlife management approach requires the government to have certain types of data, to rely on that data, to take a holistic approach when you're making wildlife management decisions. So what we've done is we've said to the court, well, you too should require the government to make science-based and holistic decisions with respect to wildlife management, so that you don't have the government making decisions in an evidentiary vacuum, at the last minute, in an arbitrary way. And we're hopeful that the court will do that. There was a bit of pushback from the government on whether or not the court should be that prescriptive in telling the government how it should be making these decisions. But even when the government was pushing back on that, there was a recognition that if the judge did provide some guidance or clarity in the written decision that will come out at some point over the next number of months, that the government would take that into account, and hopefully the minister, whoever they may be, will start to implement whatever guidance and clarity the court has provided. So whether it's in a formal court order or just in the written reasons, hopefully the government will adopt that type of a science-based holistic approach so that further litigation, whether it's over moose hunting or hunting over other types of big game, doesn't have to happen, and that these issues can be resolved on the basis of data as opposed to cross-examination transcripts and legal submissions.
Amazing. So would you guys say that this case particularly could set a precedence for future litigation cases provincially and federally going forward, regardless of the outcome one way or another? Is this, I guess we've been kind of declaring it as a landmark case. It's
I'm happy to start on that. I say yes, in the sense it's a very important case, and it's raising a number of issues that have not yet been dealt with by the Manitoba courts. So, for example, Pimachikamak has alleged that the decision was an unjustified infringement, and that puts an issue before the court that hasn't been addressed before. It's a very important question the court's going to have to grapple with. Our submission on that was that the court shouldn't be deciding that issue in this case, and we'll see which way it goes on that. But one of the issues that's being raised here is this question of how you deal with an individual licensing decision that is part of such a bigger whole. So this individual decision with respect to 4 game hunting areas, with respect to moose, but of course it's part of this broader piece of everything that's going on in northern Manitoba over the last many years and decades. And so this case, it seems clear, whichever way it goes, will be an important precedent from that perspective.
Yeah, and the decision that the judge ultimately renders will help sort of dictate just how much precedential value it has. It's quite possible that the judge will take a fairly narrow lens, and that the case really, notwithstanding that it could be about some of these broader issues, is just about moose hunting in these 4 game hunting areas for the 2024 season. And if that's the case, it's not going to have quite as much value going forward. But if the judge takes a broader perspective and really digs into some of the issues that on behalf of the Federation we were raising, and some of the other issues that were before the court, I think it does have the potential to have a lot more precedential value. And again, in the hopes that these types of decisions are being decided outside of the courtroom rather than inside the courtroom.
And I'll just jump on and add to that to say that the importance of the case isn't just the decision. So a lot of what is important has already happened. So it was important for each of these parties to stand up and make their points of view clear, to articulate their view through these submissions, and also both the points of disagreement and the points of agreement. So some points of agreement have become clear. some points that are not in doubt here is how much Manitobans care about moose and moose hunting. You know, everyone has a different lens on it or comes from a different place, but everyone recognizes that it's very important. It's an issue that we need to get a hold of to deal with going forward. And so, yes, absolutely, the decision the judge makes is going to be very important, but just more broadly, it has been important to be, I think, to be a part of this process, to be, you know, clear that we're standing up and insisting on our view of things and wanting to be part of this process as it goes forward.
And it's an interesting case because there are three different perspectives that the court is considering, right? There's the arguments of the Federation, arguments of the Michikamak Cree Nation, and the government. And while the, you know, submissions that were made on behalf of the Federation largely in some ways aligned with how the government of Manitoba viewed the dispute here, there's some key differences too between what the Federation is saying, how these decisions need to be made, and how the government has sort of taken the position that they don't necessarily feel they need to make them in that way. So, you know, how the decision comes out, I think, will say a lot about its precedential value in a broader context, but I do think that the court, you know, will have to look at all three different positions that have been taken because they're very different in a lot of ways.
There was also an alignment, a very obvious alignment on, as you said, the sustainability of the moose population and putting that resource first. Cross Lake made that very clear, as did the government, as did we. So that was really good to hear from our perspective.
Yeah, I think it can fairly be said that we're fighting over the last 20% here. I think there's a lot of common ground. Unfortunately, the last 20% is often the hardest, but it may feel like we're a long way away, but there are these areas of commonality. And I think hopefully there's an understanding that there's a shared resource here, that the government has an obligation to decide how that resource is allocated. And of course, the government has to be mindful of the constitutional rights, but it also has to be mindful of other interests and figure out the best process. And of course, we're advocating for one that takes all of these interests together.
Yeah, which is great, because in our town hall meetings, which you alluded to, there has been such a collaboration of various stakeholders and interested parties, invested parties into the not just the moose populations, but natural resources in general. And we've seen that more and more as we move around the province. More interest groups are coming to the table. And it's overwhelming and amazing that we can actually sit in a room and collaborate and have thoughtful discussions on something when there are so many different opinions and interests, but yet all aligning to the same outcome, and that's sustainability of our wildlife populations going forward. So we have felt that, and going to the town hall meetings, I felt that emotionally too. You know, that there actually isn't division when you start segregating what we're actually fighting for, which is amazing. I do want to take this opportunity, but is there anything else that we need to touch on in terms of the outcome of the couple days?
I think, and I don't know if this was mentioned yesterday, but I think either for the first time or to reiterate that the court did have evidence from several members of the Federation that talked about how important hunting in general, but specifically moose hunting is to them, to their families, to their communities, the impact that this reduction has had on them and their families, and just the way in which the government implemented that decision, didn't let them know it was a possibility, didn't ask for their input, didn't seek any input from the Manitoba Wildlife Federation. All of that information was presented. So, you know, on top of hoping that the court provides some guidance to the province on how to make these decisions in a substantive sense, hopefully if the government is contemplating some other sort of a change that may have an impact on the licensed hunting community, the court will also talk about how important it is to consult with them, to reach out, to let the community know that this might be happening, to solicit input, rather than simply acting as if their interests don't matter, they don't have a seat at the table, and the government can just disregard them completely.
Right.
That's a great point. And we're very appreciative of the MWF members who came forward and gave us their time so that we could tell their story to the court. That made a huge difference to make it, the impact on a personal level is very significant.
And it's been felt right across the province in various levels. We've heard a lot from our membership. I want to thank you guys so much for all the hard work that you've put in to date. It is not unrecognized. There was copious amounts of detail and research, and you guys, you were prepared and you were respectful and professional, and coming from a nonprofit, that was just the hugest sense of pride for me. And I just want to state that we got to this point because of the groundswell, because of our membership, because of those donors that have contributed to this cause, because of our clubs. We want to thank everybody that has come and supported MWF to date. And we are excited to keep you updated. We're excited to give you a little bit more detail as we receive it and as some solutions and some decisions are made. In the meantime, sign up for our e-newsletter, check our website, and we will provide that information as it comes to the best of our ability.
Thank you. It was our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.